Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in. Today I'm going to put together a bouquet inspired by Baby Yoda Grogu. I'm going to prep all my flowers by removing the leaves. I have some peach peonies there, and I'm working with some wire cutters that are not mine, so don't mind my struggles. But I like working with that nice bare stem of the flower, so I'm removing all the leaves, separating each flower from the bushels. For the white freesia here, it had kind of a rubber slippery coating on the outside that I knew would spin in my hands. So I'm going to use some wax floral tape to cover that stem, try to prevent that from happening. I'm also going to work in some lime green orchids that I'm separating from the big orchid branch. And I'm using a thicker gauge wire, like a 16 or an 18, to make a hairpin, wrap around the stem, and then I will cover my mechanics with the wax floral tape. I want that thicker gauge wire because the head of the flower was so heavy. I wanted it to stand up on its own, and it gave me something a little bit thicker to work with, so it doesn't slip out of my hand as I'm putting together the bouquet. And then I'm going to prep up some lamb's ear. I want to separate the individual leaves. I didn't really want a big cluster of lamb's ear. I kind of want to make them separate and kind of prominent because I feel like it really resembles Baby Yoda there pretty darn well. But when I removed those leaves, it eliminated any stem that I could wrap around to elongate that so I could work with it. So what I did was I eventually just made slits on either side of the base so that I had something to grab a hold of. And then I'll cover up my mechanics with that wax floral tape. I kind of curled it in at the bottom to give it that ear look. And then I did prep up some myrtle, which I ended up not using, but just made them more of a bite-sized chunk and then cleaning up the stems. And just like Grogu there, I'm going to not wrap, but I'm going to give my bouquet a collar of burlap. So I'm making a couple of loops and I'll wrap that with more of a medium gauge wire, like a 21 or a 22. And I'm going to leave the wire stems separate. Usually I cover it with a wax floral tape so I can work with it, but I'm going to leave it separate so I can so that I can secure it nice and tight to my bouquet at the end. And then assembling my bouquet, I'm just going to work in the colors just in an even fashion. I'm going for more of a tighter dome-shaped bouquet, and I'm just going to start with my peony and then work my orchids around it. You could do an orchid in the center and then peonies around it, but I think that brighter peacher tone kind of trumps the unique look and shape of the orchid. So I think our eyes naturally will go to that peony. And then again, just working in my flowers throughout. And I do want to bring some prominence to the lamb's ear because it does resemble Grogu so well. Looking at the colors, though, even if this wasn't a Star Wars inspired bouquet, just the colors in general are very pretty together. Working with that lime green and the peach and the white, it's just very fresh looking. And then the lamb's ear, that kind of minty gray color, gives it a nice soft background. So if you do have a kind of peach colored wedding or even just a soft green colored wedding, these would be very pretty bouquets to have for bridesmaids. So again, just working the flowers throughout, always fluffing, moving things around, trying to be cautious of which way my stems are going because I don't want to crisscross the stems, creating a focal point that nobody wants to see. Just tucking things on as I go along. And I did talk about wire. Typically, I work with like the medium gauge wire, which I mentioned was like a 21, 22. I just like the flexibility of that type of wire. And if you're doing like a fresh flower corsage, though, I do recommend going a little bit with a thinner gauge. I believe 26 probably would do well. especially if you're piercing the base of the flower to make that corsage. You don't want it so thick that the flower cracks at the insertion point, kind of like if you use a thick nail and pounding it into a 2x4, sometimes they'll crack. You don't want that to happen to any fresh flowers. So if you're working with a fresh flower corsage, I would definitely use a thinner gauge wire. And I can't remember if I mentioned it, but I will put a link in the description to both the wax floral tape and the wires, where I get them on Amazon. I'll have that in the description. So I'm just tucking that collar all around. As I had mentioned, I had left the stems of the wire on the ribbons exposed, and then that way I could give the bouquet a big bear hug and just crank it down nice and tight. And then once I got off camera and kind of looking closer at the bouquet, I wanted a little bit more depth in color and dimension. So I found this millet. It's a dried flower in a darker peach tone, which I thought kind of picked up the ears of Baby Yoda there nicely. And it's soft in texture too. Also, by tucking that in around, it kind of gives the bouquet some more movement. Having the bouquet a tight cluster like that, you're not going to get much movement unless you have streams of ribbon or something like that, or beads hanging off of it, and then you can get that kind of cool movement to it. But this will kind of give it that kind of fresh and flowy look to it. So I'm curious to find out if you guys think that I shouldn't have added this milk. So I am kind of second guessing myself, although I listed a number of reasons why I did it. I did like the way the bouquet looked before. So go ahead and leave me your comments below. And also, if you could like and subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome. Kind of gives me fuel for my fire to keep on going, doing bouquets. And I mentioned that it is a bouquet slash centerpiece because I thought, well, I have this kind of burlap sack that I put around a vase, and you can almost just make centerpieces out of there, out of your bouquet. So kind of a cute little theme to go with, just drawing inspiration from, stuff around us. Thank you so much for tuning in.